Our guest on the Motivation Show plays a scintillating role as Michael Bergen in producer Ryan Murphy's Love Story, a TV series about the life of JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. Michael Bergen dated Carolyn Bessette in the 1990s and also worked for Calvin Klein, as did Carolyn. Our guest co-stars alongside Naomi Watts, who plays Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, Mamie Gummer, who plays Caroline Kennedy, and other talented actors. Welcome to the Motivation Show, Noah Fearnley.
Thanks for having me, Eli.
Listen, I've been watching your TV series, and I'll tell you, it's a tough one because I wake up in the morning not getting enough sleep because I'm watching them late night. But it's like impossible not to keep watching new series, new
That's
episodes.
it's a very good show. There's a lot of very interesting things that are going on in the series.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a New York City boy, so I once sat in a restaurant on 20 East 76th Street called Les Pléiades, and sitting next to me was a lady, and her name was Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. She was at the next table.
Oh,
Fast, yeah, fast forward, I'm in the Michelangelo Hotel on 7th Avenue and 51st Street. There's an Italian restaurant there years ago in the 90s. And who's sitting next to me? JFK Jr. So that's my boring little
that's all right.
connection into your show.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I still haven't figured out I still, this is terrible because I'm from Connecticut, so I should, know better. But I still haven't figured out the whole streets and the names and where it's located in the, on the island. So still figuring that out.
Well, at least Manhattan is pretty easy until you get downtown,
True.
where JFK Jr. lived down there. It's like, okay, every street's named something different. But, Midtown Manhattan's pretty simple.
That's true. That's true.
Different world. So where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about that. And did you always want to be an actor? And what actually inspired you to become an actor?
Oh man, what a journey. Well, I didn't acting wasn't really my thing growing up. I was a football guy. I played football in college. And I ended
What
up getting
position?
I played safety, you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. You must be fast.
I was fast. And then I blew out my knee. So I got hurt, didn't know what to do, and went down this road of like, a mix of depression and lost identity and, figuring out conceptually what I wanted to do. Then I jumped to the modeling world and I moved around. I was in New York, I was in Miami, I was in Tampa, I was in Boston, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with that and, the roadmap of what is. And then I found acting. And I did have a little bit of an emotional childhood. My childhood was very up and down emotions, and I found this world of something that I can kind of be free in, and I keep going that way.
What gave you that up and down emotions in childhood?
Um, my parents, my
That'll
parents,
do it.
yeah, my parents for sure. They're great people, but emotions were high for a lot of different topics and reasons, and it definitely boiled over into the kids, boiled over into me and my younger brother. And I think as at a young age, at the age of like 8, 9 years old, I kind of, I was the man of the house, and I was taking care of my mother and my brother, and a lot of different things were going on, and I had to kind of navigate that at a really young age, I think.
Well, it's interesting is that parallels the story and love story, between
That's
JFK
true.
Jr.'s mom, right? And him.
Yes. Yes, very, yeah, similar. Similar.
Absolutely. So, how did you end up getting this plum role? What was the auditioning process like, and how many actors did you actually have to compete with to get a role like this?
Well, I know they read like thousands of people for all the roles. And I initially I worked on Ryan's Dr. Odyssey, his show Dr. Odyssey. And I did an episode on that, and I didn't know if I was gonna, stay in the Ryan world or what. And this role came about Michael, and I sent a tape for Michael, and a couple weeks later, we heard some things about Michael, and then I got a call about reading for JFK. And so I ended up going in with everybody in the studio, and I read for JFK. And I know they were in that process for a real long time. And then, the announcement went for Paul Kelly, who's absolutely incredible. And yeah, we got along very well on set. And then 2 weeks later after that, I got a call about Michael, and I was just very, very excited. I'll say that.
Well, I'll tell you, it is interesting because you could definitely play the role of JFK Jr. as well. And you're right, Paul does a fantastic job. So,
He does,
uh,
yes.
absolutely. And so, this is becoming a phenom. This thing here, I hear it's like number one on Hulu and Disney Plus. So, why do you think this love story has resonated so much with audiences?
Well, I think there's this part of the show that the show's not about, but it's a topic which is like there's this fame and glamour that the two of them are really dealing with on the conceptual of how both of their lives fit. But the show's not necessarily based on that. It's more based on the vulnerability and how it's dealt with, and how people deal with things that are unexpected, especially in relationships. Relationships are very difficult. Relationships are very hard to kind of figure out how to mesh people's lives together. And I think it kind of shows in this story. You have someone like JFK Jr. that is very much in the spotlight, and then somebody like Carolyn Bessette, who was living more of a normal life, and it's that's very, I think, interesting to people, especially just their story in general. You know.
What was interesting to me is JFK Jr. used to be on my block all the time on his bicycle, and Daryl Hannah lived right down the block there, and they lived together, right? So I used to see JFK Jr. like pretty much all the time on his bike, and he's just like lived on that bike. And I don't know, in today's world, I don't know how that would work, In the 1990s, just another guy on a bike,
Well,
but
there was no phones. There was no social
yeah,
media.
exactly.
There was none of this nonsense of social media where people can call and text and be
Call your
connected.
face and never leave you alone.
Yeah, you have
Everybody's
that.
the cameraman, right?
100%. Yeah. And everything's out there and is told in 2 seconds. And I mean, that time frame, I mean, what a time to be alive. So much more real.
The other part of the fascinating story between the romance, you take Daryl Hannah, of course, who was famous, from her movie star career, and then you go from Daryl Hannah, now you go to relative unknown, completely unknown. The fact that she worked in Calvin Klein office, nobody still knew her, and so the transition between two people that are famous to one person that's famous and the other one not so much is
Yeah,
a riveting story in itself.
it is.
Yeah. And how do you feel about the performances, telling that story between the Daryl Hannah character and the Carolyn Bessette character?
I mean, they're so, I mean, both of those actresses, I mean, wow. I had the privilege to be with Sarah Pigeons for most of the show. Of course, Michael and Carolyn, had this situation, Sarah is just, I mean, oh my God, she's such a wonderful person, but actress. I mean, she's just incredible. She really is. She absolutely blew my mind in so many different aspects of just her, human existence. And it was just incredible to watch. Sometimes I was watching her performance, and I was like, oh my God, I don't want to say the flip, but the character where she kind of jumped in certain moments. I was like, wow, that's a pro right there for sure.
Can you give us a summary of who Michael Bergen really was in the totality of, Carolyn Bissette's life? And how did you play that character? Did you feel that you played it exactly real to life? Did you take any liberties?
Well, Michael Bergen he was a model. He started out as a model, and he broke into the acting world. Obviously, I ended up when I got this role, I dug deep into Michael's book. Michael came out with a book called The Other Man, and um, and what I was unaware was that the show was based off of a different book. And for some reason, I thought the show was based on Michael's book, and I realized that it was not. But I figured that out way later down the line while filming. But I had this perception of Michael's book, and everybody else had this perception of the book that it was based on. And his book was called The Other Man. And so I knew Michael's perspective, and I didn't know the other perspective that everybody else had. So it kind of worked in my favor because I was looking at this in a completely different perspective and a completely different vision as everybody else. And so I look back and I'm actually grateful that I had that bias perspective from a different side because it changed things for me. Yeah, Michael is from in my opinion and perspective he's a really an incredible guy. He went down this. He started in Baywatch, and I think just human aspects. You know, we're both from Connecticut. We both have very similar stories growing up. And of course, you know, he's moved on and has a new life and has some wonderful children and a wonderful wife and so he's in a different world now. But you know, back then it was definitely a moment in his life that he probably, he'll never forget that time period of life.
So you had some steamy scenes in there and in the bed. Somebody's got to get paid for the tough work, I suppose.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, that part of Michael's life, I'm sure, must have been kind of fun to play. Tell us about those scenes.
Well, those scenes were shot very early on. So, you know, the I actually think it was a couple of like the first or second scenes that I was in, and Sarah and I had a very short time to get acquainted and understand, you know, how we both speak and perspectives and human mannerisms. So that was very early on stuff, but you know, they concept it well and I think the whole goal was to make sure that we told the story in the most respectful light of both of these characters, right? I think that was the most important, and then also like I think story was the most important thing here, and I believe that it was told in a great way, and I'm just very grateful to even have the opportunity to be involved in something like that.
Well, what's interesting is, here you have a TV series about vulnerability.
Mm.
What gives you the confidence, Noah Fearnley, to let it all loose and you yourself be vulnerable for all the world to see?
Well, I'm not I'm very I have two sides of me. You know, there's a perspective of very closed off, and then there's a perspective of once I kind of get behind that line, extremely emotional and extremely deep on levels of high and low. I've learned over the last couple of years as I've been working full time as an actor, how to get behind that line and when to really let myself go and I think in this story my goal going in was to make sure that I pushed the story along in the way that I could contribute. That was the goal. I've been, I've done a bunch of movies where I'm in their shoes, and I know how it is perspective wise for coming from the director side, the producer side, the lead actor side, And so I know that world. And so I wanted to come in, I wanted to be respectful of everybody and just make sure I contributed in the way that I could.
What made you want to have this role so much? What it really attracted you? Like, what was your like, oh my God, I got to have this?
Well, I thought, to play somebody to portray somebody that is a real individual. I mean, that is a challenge. Let me tell you, there's a lot of things that come with that. We're talking, you know, respect for the real individual. We're talking about story. We're talking about entertainment. We're talking about so many different things, especially a story like this, JFK Jr., Carolyn Bessette. So it's definitely a challenge. And I definitely wanted to make sure that I don't know, I was really more interested I was very interested in Michael's life, very interested. I think Michael's really an incredible guy. I deep dove into Michael's life, we were so similar that I had to find differences between us, and just to go down that path was this journey of, I got told about the role, and I think I had like, maybe a month to kind of prepare. I started working with a trainer, and I got in a really good shape, and I was flying back and forth between Los Angeles and New York like very often. There was a lot of work that was going into it, so I think it was just the challenge, and I know that. Um, myself on set when I'm filming, I do have a confidence to myself when I'm actually working. In my personal life, I'm very some I have a lot of insecurities, a lot. But when I'm filming and I know all my material and all the things, I have a confidence to me that I can help that helps me portray the character. Um, and so I think this was definitely a different um, difficulty of learning in the craft, which is a real life person.
It's actually fascinating to me because I think almost anybody can relate to you. We all got our insecurities and
Of course.
we all have our doubts about ourselves, yet you're in your middle of your craft. It seems, I guess, like second nature to you. Do you ever get nervous doing your scenes? Do you ever have fear, or is it you just have that supreme confidence once the lights are and cameras that and action is on?
No, 100%. There's always nerves, there's always insecurities, there's always things that go on with this. I think it's it kind of comes down to the same storyline of like how you handle it. And I think that also kind of jumps back into the show, which is like it's all about how you handle it. It's not necessarily about what is going on. It's necessarily how you're responding to it. And I think that's kind of what comes down to the whole acting thing, which is like, nerves and things that are not going to go right and XYZ, but it's necessarily how you're handling it is kind of what is going to ultimately trigger the outcome, you know?
And how is it like working with a great producer like Ryan Murphy?
Mm. I mean, Ryan is he's he's an icon in this world, and I've been watching his shows my whole life. I've been a fan of Ryan's shows my whole life, and I actually always like coming up. I always wanted to work on a Ryan Murphy show. My manager and we spoke about it for years. The goal was to work with Ryan Murphy, and the goal was to work on a Ryan Murphy show. And very interesting that it came a little bit more early on than I thought. I've been building a lot. And but to kind of start on, kind of getting in a little bit more into the Ryan Murphy world so early, earlier on than I expected, was just a dream for sure. I mean, he's a genius, that guy.
So I know that Noah, you've been in other microdramas and other TV projects. This show seems to be different, at least in my eyes. It seems to be a aha moment for you
Hmm.
professionally. Would you define it that way? And how does it make you feel to be, in a real life drama so historic and like so world recognized? I mean, JFK Jr. is it's like there's 6 billion on the people on the planet who know the Kennedys.
Yeah, I mean, my mother and my grandmother spoke of about JFK Jr. like my whole life. And they love the JFK Jr. And you know, this story is so incredible. And I think for myself in particular, to have the opportunity to just be involved in it, that's my, I've been saying that a lot recently. I was just grateful to be a part of it. That's really, and however I could contribute to the story and the production, and that was my goal. My goal wasn't to overstep. My goal wasn't to, whatever. My goal was to contribute what I can, and help the story keep moving along for this final product for people to really resonate and enjoy with.
And what kind of experience did you have in New York City filming there? What is your take on all the great places that you were at, streets and environment?
I was in Brooklyn for most of filming, and I mean that was like, I've always heard about, the things of living in New York and all this stuff, but you know I went through it, and waking up in the morning and going to like a corner store, and that whole day-to-day living was like very interesting. Something I didn't actually expect. I actually really loved living in New York. I really loved it. I had a great time. Um, did I miss LA? Yeah, the weather in LA is beautiful, but New York was really great. And you know what's so funny is I grew up in Connecticut, and I grew up always having a bacon, egg, and cheese on a hard roll. Always had that my whole life growing up. And when I was in New York, I probably got that every single morning. Went to a corner store, got a bacon, egg, and cheese on a hard roll, and then I started my day. So it was great, really being back.
So, how many episodes are there in Love Story? Tell me what people have to look forward to.
So there's eight, but I do believe there's nine now from what I've read. But I filmed one through five, so I was there for one through five, and now there's nine episodes out, and they're coming out, one every week. I believe it's Thursday nights on FX, and then it goes to streaming.
So, what's next in the life of Noah Fearnley? What do you desire? What would you like to see happen in not only in your acting life, but in your life in general? I know you got two great dogs.
I do. I mean, I was just away for the last 2.5 weeks in Atlanta filming a movie, and they've been by themselves, and I'm trying to give them my time, give them work time, family time. Oh yeah, myself too. So navigating that. Future. There's a lot of cool things that are happening right now. A lot of emails going back and forth over projects, and just a lot of cool meetings that are happening and conversations that are happening, and so I have a for sure my next real big pro I do movie a lot of those movies and stuff, but show wise, I think I have something coming up soon.
What drives you most? I mean, is it the potential fame? Is it the potential money? Is it the love of just acting in itself? Like, what really gets you going?
I think what gets me going is learning about myself. I think in my years I've lost myself many times. Probably lost myself maybe 4 or 5 times. Like hardcore lost myself. And I think I have a lot of I think there's being really frank about it. Like I'm kind of a little bit of a broken individual in a sense, emotionally and stuff like that. So I think the whole taking the parts that are not fitting and finding an aspect that I can put them back together in a way, makes me feel whole and soothing, and then it's also work, and then you can also survive and pay your bills and eat, and there's a freedom and an art and a thing to it. So I'll do it for the rest of my life. Do it for the rest of my life.
Well, I
Uh,
got to tell you, there's something very refreshing about you because you're willing to admit, the challenges that you have. A lot of people hide behind that. They hide behind the glamour of the big screen. I mean, you're just another guy like anybody else, with his challenges and his doubts and his thoughts. And that kind of makes you somewhat, fascinating and heroic in my book. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from you. Here you are. You said 4 or 5 different, uh, ups and downs and challenges. And yet you stay the course, and you've already decided this is going to be a lifetime thing. So no matter how many times you fall on the canvas, it sounds like you're the kind of guy that's going to keep getting up no matter what.
yeah, I will live, I think later down the line, I definitely have to be in LA for a little, longer and all this stuff. But I don't necessarily know if I want to stay here. I'm very private. I'm so private. I like to be in my home. I like to be by myself. So very private person. So I want to maybe go and find somewhere else that to settle down in, and maybe a small town or something like that. That's my thing. But I can't. I'm gonna do this forever, so I have to have this connection to Los Angeles, of course. But still figuring that out.
Well, Noah, I'm going to watch the next 6 episodes. I've gotten through two.
Two. Okay, there's more.
Yeah, I was a late starter here, but I want to thank you so much. Anything else you want to share with our audience?
No, Eli, I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much for this morning.